At 6 in the morning in the kind of February cold that bites straight through your jacket and into your temper, I found a brand new white Lexus sitting dead center in my winter wheat like it had grown there overnight. Steam was coming off my coffee. My blue Heeler grit was circling that SUV with a low growl. And behind me, my Excavator was idling in the frost like it already knew how this day was going to end. Then Beverly Pruitt stepped out, looked me up and down on my own land and said, "Sweet as syrup. We just need to do a little surveying. Mr. Warden, it's for the good of the community." Now, when somebody's standing in your field uninvited, after spending 2 years trying to bleed you dry with complaints and legal fees, talking about the good of the community, you stop hearing words, you hear nerve. My name is Colt Warden. I'm 58, born and raised in Harlan County, Tennessee, and I've worked the same 140 acres my grandfather bought in 1951. My father raised cattle here, rotated winter wheat, and when he died, he left me the farm. And one hard rule, don't let anybody push you off land your family bled for. This isn't some hobby farm with a cute sign at the gate. It smells like diesel, mud manure, hay, and wood smoke. In winter, it's frozen mud and split knuckles. In summer, it's dust heat and 16-hour days. It's work, real work, and I love it enough to stay when most sane people would have sold and moved to town. About 8 years ago, a developer bought the old parcel along my western fence line and built Sunrise Estates, brick houses, neat mailboxes, decorative shutters that couldn't shut out a sneeze. At first it was fine. People waved. I waved back. My land predates that subdivision by decades, and I'm not in their HOA, so I figured everybody understood one basic truth. If you buy a house next to a farm, congratulations, you now live next to a farm. Then Beverly moved in. She was a retired HR director from Nashville, early 60s. Silver hair and a tight bun, always dressed like she was about to issue a written warning to the entire county. She ran for HOA president because nobody else wanted it, won with almost no opposition, and within a few months she decided my farm was some kind of moral failure visible from her walking trail. The letters started first. My grain silo was an aesthetic nuisance. My tractor lights were disruptive to residents' sleep. My cattle operation, according to one complaint, might violate a township ordinance she dug up like buried treasure. Every time something got dismissed, and every time it still cost me money and time I did not have. I tried talking to her once calmly at a county meeting, told her my land rights were clear, my operation was lawful, and I'd appreciate it if she focused on the subdivision she was actually elected to manage. She smiled at me like she was grading a paper and said, "Every community has a character, and sometimes that character requires updating." That line told me everything. This was never about dust or noise. Beverly didn't want coexistence. She wanted the farm softened, hidden, regulated, and eventually erased. That summer, she filed an application trying to force me to plant an HOA-approved tree buffer along my western fence line on my dime so Sunrise Estates wouldn't have to look at my land. I sat in my kitchen with that letter in my hand, the window unit losing a fight with July heat. And I got so quiet, Grit raised his head off the floor to check on me. Then I went outside, split wood until I stopped wanting to throw something and called my lawyer. Prescott Hale has handled Warden family land matters since my father's time. Old truck cheap rates memory like a courthouse vault. He told me the county code had an agricultural exemption that made Beverly's little plan dead on arrival. He filed the objection. The county rejected her application. I thought maybe she'd back off. She did the opposite. A neighbor called to tell me Beverly had started going door to door, collecting signatures over supposed runoff concerns, and then I heard she'd been talking at the farmer's market telling people my operation might be contaminating the creek. That hit different. Paperwork is one thing, your name is something else. So I got methodical. I invited the Tennessee Department of Agriculture out for a voluntary compliance inspection. Let them walk the property, inspect the drainage, the creek, the erosion controls everything. The report came back spotless. Signed, stamped official. I hung it in my equipment barn and started keeping a written log of every single interaction involving Beverly, the HOA, or anybody acting on their behalf. That log became gold. By fall, Reva, who handles my books and records and does not spook easy, pulled me aside and said Beverly had been talking at HOA meetings about rezoning the area around Sunrise Estates. That's when the whole thing finally snapped into focus. This wasn't just a difficult neighbor with a clipboard. This was pressure enough. Complaints. Enough expense, enough damage to my reputation, and maybe farming the place stops making sense. Maybe I sell. Maybe a developer who needs land for Phase 2 just happens to be waiting. That suspicion turned into fact when a local reporter, Glenwood Fitch, came out to review my records and quietly mentioned Ridgecrest Properties had been making inquiries about expansion. Phase 2 needed land. My land. And then came the twist that changed everything. Prescott pulled the original development agreement for Sunrise Estates and found a covenant in the filing, a non-harassment clause. Ridgecrest, its agents assigns, and any HOA tied to that development were prohibited from initiating regulatory or administrative actions against adjacent agricultural landowners for 10 years. In plain English, the developer behind Sunrise Estates had already promised the county they would not do exactly what Beverly had been doing to me for 2 straight years. Prescott told me not to use it yet. Let her keep going, he said. Every new move is another breach. So I waited, kept the log, saved the screenshots, filed everything. Then in January, Beverly got bold enough to hand me the ending herself. Taft, my nephew, ran over one morning with his phone and showed me a public Facebook post in the Sunrise Estates group. Aerial shots of my land, red circles, arrows, accusations of potential environmental violations, and an invitation for neighbors to document my activities. It was half neighborhood gossip, half wanted poster. Prescott took one look and said, "Save all of it. This is defamation." A couple weeks later, early on a Sunday in February, Taft called and said there was a white Lexus parked inside my western gate in the south field. I drove down there, photographed everything, the car, the tire tracks, the property markers, the open gate, the frost. Then I called the sheriff's non-emergency line and filed a trespass report. After that, I texted Glenwood. Then I climbed into my excavator and continued the drainage ditch project I'd already been working on for weeks. Let me be clear, because people hear this part and get excited for the wrong reasons. I never touched Beverly's car, didn't scratch it, bump it, threaten it, nothing. What I did do was continue cutting a legal drainage trench on my own land along a route that had already been planned and started well before that morning. By the time I shut the machine down, that Lexus was enclosed on 3 sides by a fresh 3-foot trench and soft-turned clay on the 4th. It wasn't damaged, it was just very, very stuck. At 10:47, I texted Beverly and informed her that her vehicle was trespassing on private property, that a sheriff's report had been filed, and that retrieval would require a tow truck due to active drainage work. She arrived a little after 11 with 2 HOA board members and her husband Thad. They all stood there at the edge of that trench, staring at the Lexus like outrage alone could lift it out. Beverly turned and said, "You did this deliberately." I said, "I'm conducting scheduled drainage work on my property, ma'am." That was the first time in 2 years she realized the clipboard had changed hands. Glenwood was standing there with a camera. I had timestamps. I had a sheriff's report. I had the plan, the records, the photos, the whole chain. And for once, Beverly had walked onto my ground instead of dragging me onto hers. The tow truck came. It took time, winches, money, and more public embarrassment than I think she was prepared for. That night, she went online calling it intimidation. But the comments didn't go her way. Even people inside Sunrise Estates were starting to see what this looked like in daylight. The real knockout came at the county board meeting. Prescott forced the withdrawal of Beverly's rezoning petition to happen publicly on the record. The room was packed: farmers, business owners, neighbors, church folks, people who'd watched this thing drag on long enough to know what it really was. Beverly stood up and read a carefully prepared statement about further reflection and community priorities and withdrew the petition. She tried to make it sound graceful. It sounded defeated. Then the board chairman added for the record that my parcel remained agricultural land consistent with its classification since 1951. You could feel the whole room exhale. After that, it moved fast. The settlement got finalized in March. My legal fees were covered. The defamatory post came down and a public retraction went up. Ridgecrest had to reaffirm the covenant in the county record. Beverly resigned as HOA president 3 days after the meeting. By April, the Pruitts had listed their house. Here's the part that stayed with me. Most of the people in Sunrise Estates were never really my enemy. They were just living under a woman who mistook control for leadership and pressure for public service. That's a dangerous kind of person because greed rarely shows up looking greedy. Usually it shows up well-dressed, very calm, talking about standards, safety, and the greater good while trying to make your life so expensive you give up what belongs to you. What saved me wasn't rage. Lord knows I had that. What saved me was patience paper and the simple fact that truth ages better than lies. If you document enough, stay steady enough, and wait long enough, manipulative people usually build the trap themselves. It's May now. The wheat came in strong. The ditch works exactly the way it was supposed to. Grit sleeps under my truck in the evenings while I sit on the porch with paperwork and coffee. The marks from that tow truck in the south field are almost grown over. Almost. And every now and then I still think about Beverly's face when she looked across that trench and realized she had finally run out of angles. So let me ask you this. When somebody uses rules, titles, and fake community concern to try to force you off your own land, where's the line between justice and revenge? Did Beverly just get a lesson in consequences? Or did I enjoy that ditch a little more than I should have? Tell me what you think and tell me what you would have done in my boots. And if you've ever dealt with an HOA, a developer, or one of those people who thinks power gives them ownership over your peace, share your story too.